This whiskey has a bit of a story to tell. This week we're looking at the Killowen Sagaland Irish whiskey. I'm Matt, I'm the whiskey nerd, and like I said, this week we're looking at the Sagaland release of whiskey from Killowen Distillery. So let me get into the glass before I tell you a little bit more about it. And this here is the first release in the Sagaland series, or the new Sagaland series from Killowen Distillery. And I'll get into the whole Sagaland thing in a minute, but if you've never heard of the Killowen Distillery, they're probably my favourite distillery here in Ireland, just because of the fact that they're quite experimental. They are a micro, tiny little distillery. I'll put a picture of their whole setup up there. They're very small, very tiny little distillery, but they're producing some very kind of innovative, different, weird and fun, different, whether it's rums or poitíns, or in this case, Irish whiskey. And it's always coming through with the kind of authenticity. So any whiskey they make, they're currently releasing it under the Baron Tool. It says it right there, Baron Tool. It means kind of like authentic, true to the original, true to the heritage style of whiskey, because they're kind of using old mash bills that used to be used in Ireland a long time ago, maybe not so long ago, but either way, they've all kind of maybe fallen out of favour, or the rules have changed and people aren't making them anymore. So Killowen are kind of going back to the heritage and bringing back that kind of old style of making whiskey. And that's where this kind of Sagaland series comes from. So Sagaland is basically Ireland. It's a land of sagas, a land of stories. And so this here is the first release in the saga series, the Song of Sreng. And Sreng is like an old Irish, I guess, like mythological hero. So he was a member of, I won't get into the detail of it, but he was a member of what's called the Fear Bullock, which is like men who breathed. They had bellows, like they would breathe, i.e. mortal men. And they went into a war with the Tuatha De Danann, which is like the kind of mythological kind of people from heaven, maybe gods, maybe like fairies, kind of fae folk, mythological people, and they went into war with them. So Sreng was like the hero or the champion of these mortal men in Ireland before the Tuatha De Danann arrived. And Killowen have partnered with the Irish Mythology kind of podcast. These are two historians and mythology kind of researchers, and they put out a podcast, not every week, but every so often. They are also novelists, and they put out stories about Ireland. And so if you buy this whiskey, or you get a link to the podcast that is about Sreng, and when you buy the whiskey, you also were able to buy this here, which is like, I'll hold this way, so it's basically like a little leather book. And in here, you also got a little insert. So the first whiskey, the Song of Sreng, you got information about the whiskey, you got kind of like the story, the arrival of the Tuatha De Danann, you got like a little bit about who the two people were, and you got like a link via QR code to the podcast where they talked with the Song of Sreng and the arrival of the Tuatha De Danann. So it's just a kind of a cool thing, and as you get more whiskies in this, you'll get more of these little insert cards, and you fill up this kind of whole book, and you'll be able to go to the story of Ireland, the sagas of Ireland, and get to the different podcasts and get the mythology behind the country. So I'm going to leave a link down below to that podcast if you want to check it out. But also, what I find really important about here, the whiskey details. So you get actually the details of the whiskey in here. So they tell you that the whiskey is a saga in its own right, that they made a whiskey that was 100% rye, and ended up like sticking like glue, and they broke a bunch of like mixing paddles to try and get the mash shifted to get the whiskey produced. And they also tell you more details about like the mash bill, how it was matured, how it was distilled, how it was aged. Kind of very cool. So it came in with 11 3/4 of a bag of malted rye, and then 2 3/4 bag of malted peated barley. So that's like 81% of it is the rye, and 19% is going to be that peated barley coming through. And it was domestically fermented. They tell you about the distills they ran, and that it was aged, or at least aged and finished, in an ex-pinot noir cask and an ex-rye cask. Now, this is a 5-year-old whiskey. It's just actually under 6 years old, but the math here didn't quite add up. So I went to Killowen, I asked them some questions. That look, I noticed that if you do the maths on how long it's spent in those casks, it actually comes out to less than 5 years, but this is over 5 years old. Can you explain that? And there was a misprint in here. I'm not sure if they're going to fix that or not in like releases. They might send people out new cards if they ask for it, but there is basically just a misprint in it. It spent 6 months in the ex-pinot noir cask. They thought it was getting a lot of fruity, really heavy duty fruity notes. They said, let's take it out of that, otherwise that'll just take over the whiskey. And then it spent 64 months in ex-rye casks to kind of double down on that rye influence, so it wouldn't be super sweet and it wouldn't be super fruity. It would be more like a fruity note onto the whiskey. So that means it is about 70 months old, or just under 6 years, which makes sense because it was distilled in, I think it was May of 2025. I think it says it's somewhere here. Yeah, May of 2019, and bottled there at the end of February in 2024. So that gives us 2025. Sorry, so that gives us there just under 6 years old. The math in my own head was hard to do, and it comes in at 59.65%. There were only 240 bottles. My bottle is number 72 of that. And I think that's it. I mean, it is a double distilled whiskey. It should have a lot of character. So let's go in for the nose on the Song of Sreng, Sagaland number 1. Cheers. Wait, the peat is very apparent. Like it's not super smoky. It's not super heavy, but the peat is really apparent there because you get this smoky note. Not like peat smoke, not really like herbal, botanical like that, but you get this smoked note, like as if like, oh, whatever's here has been smoked, which of course 19% of the grains have been smoked. And then that's backed up with a bit of red fruits. That I can kind of see, like, it spent less than 10% of its life in the Pinot Noir casks, but those still have had quite an influence. Like, there is quite a red fruits note coming through. There's also like spicy rye grain coming through. Like, it doesn't feel super hot on the nose. Like, I'm able to go in there. I can tell it's high strength. It's a bit pungent. It's a bit heavy, but it's not burning the nose off me when I go into nose it. Like, I'm getting a bit of citrus, but it's again in like pungent, smoky citrus. It's almost like a burnt or flambéed lemon peel. That kind of like sharp, bright citrus, but in that pungent kind of character. Like the Killowen way of distilling with the two stills, lots of copper contact. It has this kind of unique DNA. Like, different distilleries will have their own unique styles, their own unique flavors that come through, and that is coming through here. Like, I'm getting, like the Killowen DNA. If you've tried anything from Killowen, there's this kind of funky, pungent note to it, and that's coming through here on the nose. But yeah, spicy, fruity, smoky, citrus, kind of heavy duty nose. It's not really subtle, so let's go in for the palate and see if it stays as subtle, because I will be going in with a little bit of water later on. So let's go in for the palate now. Cheers. Really heavy approach with, like, again, that pungent character, the peated grains, really like spicy, heavy approach. Like, it hits your palate and you go, boom, there it is. That's that big hit. And Sreng, the warrior, was famous for being really strong. So like, it comes in with that heavy duty approach and it lingers, it coats your mouth. But I wasn't really getting, on the first sip, I wasn't really getting a huge amount of those red berries. Like on the nose, yeah, still getting those red berries. When it hit my palate, I was getting spicy grains, peat smoke, those kind of heavy notes. So I'm gonna go in again for another sip, let it sit for a bit, see if I can find those berries. Cheers. Yeah, I let it sit there for a little bit longer and it became a bit fruitier. Like, I definitely again got that charred citrus, that like pungent, heavy duty lemon peel. Bit of red berries, but instead of being like sweet red berries, more like tart red berries, like raspberries, things like that coming through, like those heavy sweet red berries with a bit of tartness coming through. And again, that rye spice. Again, like 81% of it is rye. You're gonna get that black tea, eucalyptus, almost like not green tea, yeah, like more like black tea, that heavy earthiness coming through. Bit of like, I wouldn't say menthol, but again, that kind of like green note that's been cooked, like that kind of that black tea note. We get that, yeah, herbal, botanical with that peat smoke rounding it out. Like, the more I sit with it, the less peaty it was. Like, the peat was there and then the other notes kind of like came up to meet it, if that makes sense. Like, you get that big hit of peat and then the other notes come up. So I'm gonna go in again, this time focus on the finish, see what lasts the longest. Cheers. Okay, so like I said, big strong approach, citrus, tart berries, and then it kind of goes away. Like it's not gone. Like I can still feel the citrus, the little bit of the ABV tingle, maybe a touch of oak. Like I wasn't really getting a lot of oak on the nose or in the palate. A little bit of tannins now. It's actually surprisingly clean, despite how pungent the nose was, despite how pungent, heavy duty the palate was. It's quite a clean finish on the whiskey. Like it does peak and then fade off pretty quickly. Like it becomes quite soft. And one thing I'm going to say about this whiskey, I also tried it with water. So I have here a version of it with water. And so one thing I noticed with the Killowen Sagaland, not Sagaland, with the whole Baron Tool series, some of them I absolutely love at cask strength. Others I prefer with a bit of water. And one thing I like about Killowen, like they're not saying that this whiskey is best at cask strength. If you look at like Redbreast cask strength or things like that, they're putting it out saying this is a good cask strength whiskey. With the Baron Tool series, they're saying this is it, this is the authentic original whiskey as it came out of the cask. They're not saying it's the best at that strength. So you're kind of allowed to play around with it, and that's what I've done here. I've taken 20 ml of the whiskey and added about 5 ml of water. So that brings it down to about 48%, a nice solid drinking percentage. Like if you ever go to a distillery, they'll tell you that when they nose whiskies, when they taste whiskies, they bring it down to like 20 or 30%, just to let you kind of taste it and get all the notes out of it. And that's what I think comes through here. I think at a lower ABV, yeah, this whiskey comes alive. Like it becomes far less pungent. You get a lot more of those fruity, sweet notes out of the whiskey. Like it's still citrusy. There's still a little bit of peat, but I'm getting a lot more of this red berries and a lot more sweetness to it, and the kind of citrusy note, which was kind of pungent, kind of burned, it's almost like fizzy now. And like when I was writing my notes for this whiskey, I was reminded of a thing called the dib dab. I'll put a picture of it up there for anyone who's outside of Ireland and the UK. You might not know what a dib dab is. It's a strawberry. It's where you get this little paper sachet, and inside of it is a strawberry flavored lollipop and a whole load of sherbet. And so you take your strawberry lollipop, you dip it into the sherbet, you lick it, you take the sherbet off it, and you go in again. You kind of like eat your sherbet lollipop. And that's what this reminds me of. I get this red berries, sweet, sugary, bright note with that kind of fizzy, almost lemon note, almost like tangy note. And yeah, it's quite sweet, quite friendly. I'm getting that kind of grain sweetness, but not pungent. And at the base of it, that's where I'm getting the peat. Up front on this one here, yeah, the peat smoke is heavy. Here, it's more like an accent, like a counterpoint. So I think it's a little bit rounder out here. So let's go in for the palate with a bit of water. Cheers. Interestingly, I think that with the bit of water, it actually has a bit of a richer mouthfeel. So this here, big heavy duty approach, big wallop of flavor. Here, it's almost creamier. Like it's definitely softer, it's definitely lighter, but it feels a little bit richer. I still get the kind of spicy rye, the eucalyptus, the black tea, those kind of notes coming through, but with a bit of a creamy undertone to it, with this, like, again, a bit of citrus, a bit of like that lemon note, maybe a little bit less red berries. I'll go in again for another sip, maybe a little bit less red berries, but again, that kind of undertone of peat. Yeah, the peat is definitely like a sweet peat. Like you definitely get the peat accented up with a bit of like that. I wouldn't say red berries, I'd say again like that kind of tart red berries, like the raspberry, like I was saying on this one here. On the nose, quite sweet red berries. On the palate, kind of tart red berries coming through. Again with that citrusy, lemony note. So final, go in again, focus on the finish. Cheers. Okay, so on the finish, like you'd expect, a bit softer. So this here, the high strength, came in with this big heavy approach, faded off. This one here comes in with a soft approach and then does fade off again. So you're still getting that kind of like that cleanliness at the end. It's maybe a little bit less clean, like I'm getting a little bit more of those oak tannins. Maybe that's because I've had a lot of it now, so more of it is sticking to my palate, more of it is kind of sticking around. Almost biscuity cooked grains, like the rye note here, those cooked rye grains, that's coming through a little bit more on the finish here than this was. Touch of tannins, less than I was getting here, with just, yeah, bit of sweetness, bit of lightness, bit of softness. So I won't say that you'll be able to find this whiskey, except maybe at auction, because undoubtedly some people will be selling it at auction. If you were able to find this, if you like Killowen, chances are you will like this. It's got a lot of the Killowen DNA to it. Me personally, I thought at cask strength it was enjoyable. It was nice. But I think at 46, 48%, I think it sings. I think you get a lot more enjoyment out of the whiskey. Here, it's a big, heavy, meaty hit of a whiskey. Here, a bit softer. Like, it's called the Song of Sreng, and this here, I think, sings a bit. It seems all a little bit more balanced, a little bit more harmonious, and so for me, this is where I'll be having it, and sure, that'll help my bottle last a bit longer. It'll help me last a bit longer because, like I said, 20ml of whiskey, 5ml of water, so that's going to add, what, a quarter to this bottle. I won't add water to the bottle. I'll just, every time I pour it, I'll just pour myself in a little bit of water. But for me, I think this is where it is. I'll be adding a little bit more water to this. I put out whiskey reviews like this review every Wednesday. I put out cocktail recipes featuring whiskey every Friday. I won't have a cocktail recipe featuring this whiskey because it's kind of rare, but I will have a different whiskey cocktail this Friday. So if you want to see that, make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that thumbs up button, and let me know down in the comments below if there's a whiskey you think I should review in future. But now, I'm going to keep on enjoying this one, and I'll see you next time. Sláinte.